This is the Initiates Podcast. Here, we create space to explore the path of initiation as we reawaken the forgotten wisdom that resides within us all. I am your host and guide, Natalie Grace. Join me every Thursday for an enlightening exploration of contemporary spirituality. It's my honour to journey with you. Welcome to the Initiates Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. On today's episode, I am going to be talking about 2022. Since December began, I've been in the energy of reflection. For some reason, the tarot cards were pointing to this all this week, but I felt called to take pause and just begin reflecting on the year that has been. I know we're not quite at the very end of the year yet, but we're nearing its completion, and energy can get a bit hectic in the final weeks of the year of December. So while it's still relatively calm, I wanted to reflect with you all on the energies that we have journeyed through this year. I'm going to be sharing my observations and perceptions of the collective energies for 2022. There's a really amazing theme that popped up around calibration that I'm going to explore with you. And then I will also be talking about my own personal journey, the achievements, the challenges, the joy that I've experienced, and the lessons that I've journeyed through this year. But before I get into the episode, I have something exciting to share with you all. To wrap up 2022, I am hosting a listener party, a free listener party, and as a listener of the Initiates, you are invited. This party is going to be happening on YouTube. I'm going to be doing a live stream on the 20th of December for US listeners or North American listeners, and the 21st of December for Australians. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to be hosting a guided reflection that explores our achievements, our challenges, and our lessons. I'm also going to be giving away free mini tarot readings on the live stream for the people in the chat who feel called to ask questions. So I'm going to make this as fun as it can possibly be in this live stream environment. If you would like to attend, jump into the show notes. I've popped a registration link in the show notes. Just click that and fill in some quick details, and I will send you the link to the session along with some reminders in the lead up to the event. Building this community has been an amazing experience so far this year, and I'm so excited to expand on this community in 2023. So this is the first community event that I'm throwing, and I'm really excited to share space with you in real time. So if you would like to attend, click that link, and I'm super excited to see you there. All right, let's journey through 2022. So I've been sitting in this energy of reflection this week, really immersing myself in my observations and perceptions of this year and the energies that this year has held for us, both at a personal level for myself and also at a collective level. I thought it was a good time to do it now because in the last weeks of December, life can get really hectic. There's a lot of demands, there's a lot of family responsibilities and engagements, there's work parties and friend parties, there's travel, there's holidays, there's lots that happens at that time of year. And I felt really called to take pause in this first week of December to reflect on this year and kind of just immerse myself in the reverence for what this year has provided and taught me. And it's been a really lovely experience. So I'm pretty excited to share my observations with you now. And it's interesting because this exploration was prompted by tarot cards that I pulled both for the collective in my weekly collective reading over at Crystal Aura Tarot, but also for myself in a personal card read on Monday. After thinking about my own experience, and I sat down to reflect on the collective experience, what did we collectively learn and experience this year? I was writing down my notes, as I often do, as I often prepare for my episodes. And while I was doing that, good stuff was coming through, but I received a very clear hit of wisdom, higher wisdom, and it was the word of calibration. And this is a really interesting word because I'm like, wow, this list of descriptors that I've made, this one word really hits the nail on the head for me. And I'm really interested to see if this resonates with you guys too. But I felt like this year, calibration is really attuning to a different state of being. It's the process of attunement, basically. And I feel like that's definitely what we've been experiencing this year, this attunement to a higher collective frequency. And we're all experiencing that in different ways on a personal level, but I feel like we've all kind of been upgraded this year. I think it has a lot to do with the turmoil and the chaos that we've all traveled through or journeyed through during the pandemic. So we had a really intense past couple of years where we were really playing in the extremes of polarity, a lot of lower vibrational experience too. We were stuck for quite a long time in the energy of fear and distrust and survival, some real kind of primal root chakra challenges going on while we were all collectively experiencing the pandemic times. And this year we've been given this reprieve. We know our world has changed. We will always be, I think any generation who's lived through this time will live with the imprint of the potential for pandemic. And I think we're going to be subjected to the side effects of this from a social and legal perspective as we move forward into the future, that there are going to be impacts from this pandemic time on, I want to say, our sovereignty and our privacy and our autonomy when it comes to health. But I might save that for a different episode, going into that in more depth. Getting back to the frequency. So we've journeyed through those really intense energies and a lot of chaotic, destructive energy. And we've been given this reprieve now before we get confronted with all those, with new forms of oppression. We've been given this time that feels like we've gone back to more of a sense of normalcy and stability. And it's with this safety that we've been able to establish this higher frequency, or perhaps just observe it and recognize it existing around us and within us. Many people would credit that to Gaia and her ascension, her dimensional ascension. Whether you subscribe to that opinion or not, I think we can definitely all agree that we're in a higher vibrationary state than we were in 2020 and 2021. So I'm very grateful for that, because it did cause so much turmoil to so many people. And it really does feel nice to have moved out of that survival mode into a place where we feel a little bit more safe again, a little bit more stable, a little bit more normal. And we're really able to just feel and witness the world with perhaps a fresh perspective. A lot of people during the pandemic talked about how the just mundane schedule of day-to-day life, of work and then weekends and, you know, all the responsibilities and tasks that go along with that, all those ways that our time is occupied, they didn't really know how to sit in quiet by themselves. They didn't really know how to do things for themselves, basic things, that people got to do when they had more time at home for themselves. Once they got through the discomfort, perhaps, they got to put themselves first in new ways and try things that, skills that we've all forgotten about, baking bread and knitting and sewing clothes and those kinds of things, reading, doing puzzles, things that we wouldn't have bothered with unless we were given that time. And while the time was very challenging for so many people, they see it as a gift. And I hold great reverence for that. On the other side of things, many people saw that time as very oppressive, and I also hold reverence and respect for that experience too. We all sit on a spectrum, right? So we've journeyed through that time. We've come out of it with a new appreciation of what life can be. And I think this is where this higher vibration comes from, that we've been given a glimpse into some new way that could be possible. And I subscribe to this myself really deeply. This idea of the new world isn't something that's already decided upon that we just get to travel to. No, this is something that we actually create. We create, each and every one of us create this new world in the way we live our lives and the way we live in our authenticity and what we prioritize. And so I feel like with this new sense of what could possibly be, we've actually opened up an opportunity to upgrade, evolve a little bit. Once we held that vision collectively, we then need to attune to it. It's a basic step in manifestation that your aim is to attune to the frequency of what it is you desire. So I think this year has been a really big process of attunement, but calibration. So in addition to that refreshed sense of imagination about what could be, how we can evolve to living in new, more fulfilling ways, this calibration to an elevated frequency I've felt in a few different ways. So time's a really good example of something that's felt different and that I put down to, say, an energetic upgrade or up-leveling. And I can't say that time has changed. What I think I can say is my experience of time has changed. That's the change in frequency that I have experienced is made me experience time differently. So obviously the whole schedule that we used to have pre-pandemic where, we were burning ourselves out caring so much about work, and we were glamorizing hustle and being constantly busy and all those things, giving so much of ourselves to things outside of us that don't have our highest interest at heart. Yes, we've experienced a new form of schedule and a new way of schedule that seems to be allowing us a little more time for, say, work-life balance, or to prioritize ourselves and what we want and our desires more than we were allowing ourselves to do before. But it's not just about schedules, and it's not just about feeling like time's flying, which it does feel like. It's also time feeling like it's flowing instead of just traveling at this very static pace in one direct line. I've felt time to be much more cyclical this year, and to be moving more like waves. And I felt myself moving in this water of time, bobbing up and down with the waves. And if I'm riding the crest of a wave, I'm in intention, I'm in intentional action, I'm participating, I'm creating, I'm making the use of that time. But then I've also felt this like reflective introspection, this contraction as well, where I'll be sitting watching the waves, watching other people catch the waves, and I'm riding out the time. So I'm sure you can imagine the way you can experience time as someone bodyboarding, say, or body surfing on a wave is very different to the person who's sitting patiently waiting for their wave to arrive. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I feel like I can best describe my experience of time for this year. And again, I feel that that is an example of this calibration to a different energy, that in this higher frequency, time can be experienced differently. Something that's changed for me is I don't feel guilt around losing time. If I feel like I haven't completed something in the schedule that I planned or expected, or something's late that's coming from some other place or someone else, I don't feel stressed by that. I don't feel pressured. I don't feel like I'm failing at something. It just is. It's an acceptance, which has been a nice change, actually. I wonder if you've felt that this year as well. I feel like calibration has also affected us at a values level. So this is collective values, but also individual values, that we're making these slight adjustments this year after living through what we've lived through in the past couple of years and coming back to this place of safety, as I described before, that we're able to check in with our values and perhaps test them and question them and see whether they still fit, or whether we need to evolve them in some way to better reflect where we're at right now, better reflect our authenticity, our intentions. I feel like over the past few years, there's been a really huge pressure with values being projected onto us as a collective that we've felt forced to adopt. And with more safety and space around us, we're able to actually check in and see that if the values that we were holding actually belong to us, or were projections that we've attached to. So I think that's been a really beautiful process for many people, and it's something that has contributed to the elevation of our vibration as a collective. One other thing that I want to note, which I think I felt physically, and I know a lot of others have as well, is this experience of shedding layers of density. This actually is manifesting in a very physical way, where we're wanting to shed layers of self. And for me, one really easy physical example is a reduction in appetite, a changing of diet, and it's not to do with nutrition or weight so much. It's more about the vibration of what I'm consuming. That there's a much greater awareness now of consumption that makes me feel heavy and dense versus consumption that makes me feel light and nurtured and nourished. So that's just one really simple example. On a more spiritual level and emotional level, I think that we've all gone through a huge shedding process this year that's really helped us to shed density and enlighten ourselves, hold more light within us by facing our shadows and illuminating them and finding acceptance for them. This is something I talked about in the shadow work episode, but it's an intentional process when you do this work, and it's sacred work, and it really does feel like there's a critical mass being reached of people. Perhaps it's to do with a generational shift where we are ready to do this sacred work. We are willing to do this sacred work. We are wanting to take this on to shed density for all who are to come after us. I think this is a beautiful thing, and I'm really excited to see where this takes us, because yes, we're going to be challenged with integrating this new way of living. From my own experience, you've heard me in previous episodes talk about my self-devotional rituals, and nourishment with diet and movement was a huge part of that. Letting that practice slip in the middle of this year, I'm being challenged now with feeling more dense on lots of levels, physically, spiritually, energetically, and being challenged to think, is this how I want to live? Do I want to feel this dense? I've felt what it's like to feel lighter in my body, lighter in myself, lighter in my emotions. I want to get back there, and I'm going to do the work. So calibration, on the one hand, it's happening energetically in the background without us knowing. But on the other hand, I think we've enhanced this experience of calibration by our own intention in doing this really important work of shedding layers of density. Another theme that I've just touched on, but I'll expand on a little bit more, is stability. So after the time of intense polarity and intense chaos, things are starting to feel a little more stable. I don't think they're going to feel this way for long personally, but it's been really nice to have this time feeling like we can exhale and pause and sit in safety. Having this energy of what it is to be able to rest and to flow and exhale, and to move out of that survival mode that I spoke of earlier, has been really important, and it's helped a lot with the shadow work we've all been doing, because it's provided us with a level of safety we were lacking to consider the prospect of surrender. And surrender takes a lot of courage, and I think a lot of will and intention. And this is something that I think a lot of us have been finally, after a long time, been able to do, is feel safe enough to surrender to whatever it is we had been resisting. And this is an ongoing process, but I feel like a lot of us have started the process of surrender, perhaps the intentional practice of surrender, and receiving the outcome of that, what it is, what happens when you do make the intention, you intentionally surrender. What do you receive? What do you feel? What do you experience? I think they're really good questions to ask, and I'll leave those questions with you. So this stability has also provided us to experience more harmony. I think we've been able to turn off a bit of the outside noise a bit more this year than the previous couple of years, which means we've been less affected, less influenced by voices, by narratives, by opinions, by projections of the outside world, whether it's family and friends, or whether it's social movements, or whether it's news and politics and all of those things, media. I think a lot of us discovered that we could find harmony within ourselves and revel in that harmony and project that back out into the world. So we've all been able to experience more feelings of harmony, of harmonious existence, harmonious interaction at a collective level. This harmony is emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual, it's all of those things. And the experience of harmony, of living harmoniously, I think is very telling, because I think it's a byproduct of when we anchor into our own truth. When you really know yourself and you anchor into your truth and you live your truth, there's so much more harmony to be felt, because you're not fighting yourself, you're not resisting yourself, you're not denying yourself. So that's been a wonderful lesson, I think, for us in the collective this year. And something we also, I think, if we're aware of this potential to feel or live harmoniously, that vibration is something we can attune to as well. And aiming to attune to that raises us all, I think. It's been a year of transition, I think. I mentioned earlier this transition of going from the pandemic times to post-pandemic times, and then post-pandemic times. We're in this kind of lull phase right now where things feel pretty good. But what happens next? There's all this talk of collapse, financial collapse. There's talk of environmental disaster, climate disaster. There's still a lot of fear narratives going on. I think we've just kind of all agreed for a little time to detach from them for a bit. We're not all getting wound up by all the politics stuff as much as we were. And I think it's because we've all been preparing for a much bigger transition, whether that's socially or financially or cosmically even, that we understand at a very deep level that the world around us is changing in profound ways. And while we can't control that change in the outer world, we can influence change and transition on a personal level. And that's probably why so many big challenges, or integration challenges, as I call them, have been thrown at us this year, especially in the second half of this year. Integration challenges, the way I see it, are experiences in life that challenge you to live the lessons you've learned when you do your shadow work. And so 2022 for me, I feel like it's been a training ground for being able to weather the much bigger transition that is to come. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to observe new patterns kind of setting in that point to this transition that we're going through, and it's going to become more profound as we move through, I want to say, to next year and to the year following. I think a good change that I've observed is an increase in awareness, especially self-awareness. So people seem to be publicly self-reflecting on their decision-making and their understanding of things, and not being afraid to share that process of understanding of self and of the outside world. So I want to say, as a collective en masse, we're kind of experiencing a growth in our awareness of the true nature of reality. Two obvious ones here: society and how it operates, and psyops, which I think I want to cover in a future episode, a near future episode. I have a lot to say on those, but we're becoming more, I don't even want to say more clued in, I just think less ignorant of the world and how it works and our place within it, and how we might be used by society, and how our new understanding might be very different to what we were taught about the world and who we should trust, and whether that's government, whether that's celebrities, whether that's Hollywood and fashion, whether that's elections, all of those things. I think because we've developed this new self-awareness, this new level of self-awareness, more of us are willing to question our perception of reality and evolve our perception of reality, which I think is a really good thing. Before we just go along with whatever, cancel culture was a great example of that. That was rife for a good few years. These mass pylons where people were just repeating stuff that had been projected onto them on social media without any thought of the impact of words and actions. And I think now we are less willing to partake in those kinds of experiments, of those kinds of games. We have a greater awareness of the actual impact that we make on an individual level when we contribute to that kind of mass pylon. So that's just one example of what I would describe as a growth in self-awareness on a collective level. One last observation for the collective is the energy of exchange. This has been a really cool energy to participate in and also witness. I've been witness to beautiful exchanges this year. of collaboration, of sharing wisdom, of sharing beauty, really heartfelt, generous sharing that has nothing to do with money. Sometimes it does, but it's not coming from a place of needing something. It's coming from a place of giving, which is just beautiful. There's so much healing that can be done, I believe, when we approach exchange solely with the intention of giving. Of course, we're welcome to receive and receive with grace and reverence, but just to be able to give because it's your desire or it's what you feel called to do or it's how you wish to show your support. It's so beautiful, and I experienced and witnessed so much of that this year. It makes me so happy. I really do sense that this will become more frequent and common between people to be engaging in open exchange rather than conditional exchange. So again, it's not, I'll give you this, but I'll get that in return. It's more like, I'm just so happy to offer my help. It doesn't matter about what I get in return, and I don't require anything. I see this mentality as something that's going to become more common because it's part of that higher vibration. It's part of that new vision that we're starting to open our eyes to seeing a new world, a new way of operating, a new way of engaging. But what's interesting is that I think it seems like such a simple thing to do, but I think it actually takes a lot of imagination and a lot of courage to offer and also to receive. So I want to encourage that moving forward, embodying that imagination and courage that we've started to all feel and experience and witness this year. It's such a beautiful antidote to the polarized distrust that has been so frequent, that we've been immersed in during the pandemic. I just can't wait to see more of this in the world. And in my sense of living in a higher accord, where we're creating essentially the Garden of Eden in our own world. Yeah, you can wait to go to heaven to experience it if that's what you believe in, but why wait when you can create it here? And I feel like this open-hearted exchange is a huge key to creating that reality. So they're my observations of the collective. I'm sitting here thinking about it now and I'm like, you know what? I've been able to spin all of those positively. Surely there's some negative stuff that's happened this year. And there definitely has. I think that going through this process, even though we've been allowed to socialize now, especially if you've come out of this lengthy experience of lockdown, like where I live, coming into this more social atmosphere, yet feeling many of us have felt alone still, and especially embarking on that shadow work and the integration of that shadow work that's been happening this year. There's been a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil, a lot of challenge, but it's all for our highest good. So I don't want to gloss over that bit, but I really do think that the experience that we've all shared this year is going to be so, as I'm talking, these beautiful flocks of galahs just flew past. I know I've got a lot of American listeners. I encourage you to look up a picture of a galah, Galah. It's the coolest bird. It's my favorite bird. I think it's a Australian parrot, and they're pretty funny. They've got really lively spirits. If you can hear, that's their call. They're all just like hovering over my head right now. Yeah, so I guess that's a beautiful symbol of what I was talking about, that even in some really dark periods, some dark times, some dark revelations that have been happening this year for the collective, it's been really difficult and isolating and lonely, but it's also been a really formative step in our individual and also collective evolution. It's building our courage, it's building our strength, we can't move forward without going through these parts. And I feel like this year for so many of us was the year that we were just like, okay, I'm ready. I don't want to put this off anymore. I'm ready. Let's do it now, because I want to move forward and I want to move upward. I want to ascend. I want my vibration to rise. So I'm not discounting at all the real hard, difficult challenges and emotions we felt this year. But I feel like those have happened because we have basically energetically decreed that we're ready. We're ready to do this. We're ready to start moving forward. And I think that has a lot to do with this mass awakening, as a lot of people describe this mass spiritual awakening that's happening. It's a really beautiful thing. And I'm glad I can say that in a place of calm safety right now, where I'm able to look back on the year and find gratitude and reverence for even the most difficult lessons. So on a personal level for me, this has been such a year of growth. There's been expansion, but I feel like the expansion's still within me and it's not quite projecting outward as much as it wants to. And I'm excited for that to happen in 2023. I think that's going to be a huge year of expansion for me. But in regards to my own journey of growth this year, I have experienced a huge transition in my life, my lifestyle, my career, my identity. I've really been focused on my spiritual evolution and coming into closer alignment with my mission, understanding my mission more deeply, taking action on my mission. And there's been a few lessons that I've taken. So I want to talk about achievements first. One of the biggest achievements is this podcast. I could see it and feel it in my vortex for a number of years. I am such a big listener of podcasts and I've always, I guess, enjoyed communicating. I didn't really have an outlet for it outside of work. So I channel all of my desire to communicate and share through my work. So once work stopped kind of serving me and fulfilling me, my career as a digital consultant, I kind of felt really disconnected, I guess, and unheard and unseen. But I also realized that the journey that I was being taken on, there was a reason why I'd broken that connection. Well, one, because what I was communicating wasn't really important. I'm here to do much deeper work than just communicating about technology projects and process improvements. Even though for some weird reason I found that really interesting for quite a long time. I think it's because I enjoyed helping people understand things more easily, understand complex concepts more easily, understand visions that other people have and break them down into steps. You know, I worked as a project manager, developing technology, as well as someone who worked on a lot of process improvements. And it was all quite stimulating work when the people were good. But yeah, after a while, I just became really unfulfilled by that work because I knew on a deep spiritual level that I was here to talk about much more important stuff. And over the past year especially, I have sought so much insight into what I'm here to do, and whether the messages came through me, through my own consulting with my higher self, through my tarot cards, through readings with other highly skilled readers, I'd always be told that I'm here to share a message and that it had to be delivered through my voice and that the vibration of the message held the wisdom, even more so than my words. And so it was really obvious to me that the podcast was the channel for that. But I had so much fear around being seen and heard that I have worked through this year. It's taken me immense courage. If I think about where I was at the start of the year and the amount of terror I felt before my first live stream doing tarot on a full moon, which I think happened in around February, I can't believe it. It's gotten to the point now where I feel like I'm lacking courage because all of this being seen and being heard has become so normal for me. But what I came to understand is the courage required to push through these programs of fear and terror of being seen and heard that had been with me for lifetimes was immense work and took a great deal of shadow work, of confronting my own shadow and cultivating so much self-acceptance. So I'm really proud of this achievement for me this year, to launch this podcast, to launch my Crystal Aura Tarot channel that came first, to start doing live streams where I was seen and heard in real time rather than just relying on this highly kind of processed and curated Instagram feed, you know. And this is after years of removing myself off social media and actively choosing to hide myself, basically, because that's what I needed to do. So much of my identity had been around this like curated vision of myself that I project out on my social media channels. And this was just in my personal life. I didn't really know who I was outside of that like contrived projection of self. There was so much ego there. So that work has been really important for me. A beautiful woman that I got a reading with was able to share with me that there was some real past life wounds that I was still holding on to that held me back from sharing my message. And it's kind of nice to share because I feel like so often we just put those kinds of fears down to a witch's wound, but it's not the case for all of us. For me, and I resonated with this deeply, it felt like I understood and knew that it was the truth. Having had nomadic experiences in past lives where I was continually shunned for sharing my message and locked out of communities and not having a home, not having a community. And I basically I placed myself in that position again during the pandemic where I felt completely disconnected. And it's what I needed to do. I needed to relive that turmoil in order to move through it and get to the place where I'm at now. So I'm so grateful with the ease that I feel in sharing publicly, in going on camera, not having to doll myself up all the time, on speaking about things that I would have been terrified to speak about that seem really weird to kind of most normal people. So I'm really proud of that. But I also sense that there's a lot more work to do. So at the start of the year, I used a lot of my courage. I cultivated so much courage. I really broke through some really intense barriers for myself. But in the second half of this year, I feel like I've gotten comfortable, and that's going to be a really big challenge for me in 2023. I want to grow and expand outward, and that's going to take fire energy. So 2022, the courage was required to overcome these mental programs that triggered that deep-rooted fear. So it was almost reprogramming myself on a mental level to heal those deeper energetic levels of self. But this new focus in the new year is going about being brave in using my energy and cultivating my will and fire, which I feel like I'm lacking right now. And being brave enough to act on my passion and to believe that what I dream of is actually possible, taking that courageous action and actually building that dream instead of allowing my mind to control my priorities and determine what's possible, because I'll always be limiting myself in some way if I rely on my mind. So I feel like there's a leaning into that kind of Aries energy of just doing it. I lack Aries in my chart. So So this is going to be a challenge for me next year. So yeah, that's one of my biggest achievements. I've also been really proud, and I don't think pride is a bad thing if it's done with reverence to oneself, and gratitude for all the people that have helped me get to this point, because there's been a lot of people, mentors and influencers and friends that I've made this year who really helped me and supported me in feeling confident and comfortable to share and share more openly, share more frequently. But something else I'm proud of is my creativity. I've been really able to lean into my creativity in this journey this year, creating content and playing around with it without too much pressure. I've been able to make some really cool content that I'm really proud of, and that I feel excited about sharing with people. And I'm so excited to take that to a whole new level next year. I'm moving into a role of guide and teacher, which I feel like I'm destined to do in this lifetime, to teach about all manner of things to do with our spiritual development and awakening, to do this in a way that is collaborative and based in community. I'm so excited to share this with you next year. But for now, that's just a bit of a taste of what's to come. So having that creativity in life, and even just being creative and in flow with how I spend my time, not allowing myself to get bored with my schedule. You know what? If I get bored with my schedule, I've made it. So it's up to me to change it. I don't have to lock myself in, feel guilty or feel pressure about not having done stuff when I'm in control of what I do. So having creativity in so many aspects of life it's made my life way more enjoyable this year, which has been really cool. And being in flow in that way, I feel like has definitely allowed me to be more in alignment with my own truth, with my own desires, with my soul mission, all of those things. So I've definitely felt a lot of alignment this year personally. Something that was a bit more of a surprise and perhaps not as expected, but it should have been obvious, is also this transition into the energy of leadership through sharing what I share with you all across all my channels. Thought leadership, I feel like energetic leadership as well. Not necessarily in a hierarchical way, but more in a space holding way, a frequency holding way that, as I've mentioned earlier, with my own experience and skills and psychic senses, I do feel like I'm often a couple of steps ahead in others in understanding how things are working and what's to come, and how we can best prepare and best work on ourselves. And I think in sharing that, it does mean that I've stepped up into a form of, I'm going to say, subtle leadership, of subtle influence. So I feel like that's a bit of an achievement for me as well, but it's also a deep responsibility that I hold with great respect. And it's something that I'm going to continue to foster and nurture next year and beyond. So there's some of my fondest achievements. There's been some great joy I've experienced this year as well. Joy has come from people, actually. So I've experienced joy in my relationship. When two people are working on themselves, I think that's inevitable. Life becomes more enjoyable, and a deeper love is formed. So there's been so much joy that's come through that. But I've also cultivated some beautiful new friendships that have brought me a lot of joy. The fostering of community, I feel so much joy around people coming together in the spaces that I create. It's a beautiful thing. And I also welcomed a beautiful spirit baby into the world this year, my little niece, with open arms, and she's taught me so much already. I'm not someone who's had much experience with babies and children, and it's been such an amazing experience just to see her grow and evolve, and also the family around her, holding her, supporting her, loving her. It's just been so beautiful. I'm so grateful for that joy I've been able to experience this year. And there's been some challenges and some lessons. So those integration challenges I spoke of definitely have hit me at a personal level. I've spoken about this in previous episodes, but that challenge to really integrate and live the lessons around healing, around self-healing, physical and emotional this year, where if we go through a process of healing and then once we're healed, which I don't think is ever possible, once we get to a level of feeling better, we drop what we've been doing. We've dropped our practices and all of a sudden we're gone back 2 or 3 steps to where we were, and we're challenged by the reminder of that older energetic frequency and whether we want to stay in that state, or do we actually want to put in the work that's required to maintain that level of health, of self-nurture, of awareness, of ascension, really. So that's been quite a big challenge and something that's needed intentional awareness to navigate and to learn from. And the lessons this year that have come from those challenges have been in surrender and trust, but also forgiveness and acceptance. So that's my journey for the year. And I would love to interact with you and hear more about your journey this year and the energies that you've observed and witnessed and experienced this year. So much so that I've decided to throw a listener party. It's a party to celebrate the end of 2022, a bit of a wrap up, an energetic wrap up. I'm going to be hosting this on YouTube, so it's free. Anyone can come and attend. I will make it really easy for you though, because I've got a registration form that you can fill out so that you can get instructions all the times depending on your time zone, and a link to my channel. I've actually got a really lovely community over there building, beautiful souls finding me through YouTube, through my videos there, which is simply just a video version of this audio podcast. And I also know that I've got lots of listeners in America. So being in Australia, I host live streams every 2 weeks, but I understand that the time zones don't always match up. So for this listener party, I'm really thrilled to be able to host it at a time that suits the North American community. So you're all invited. We'll be gathering together to discuss our biggest lessons and achievements this year, like I've just done. I want to cultivate a real environment of sharing and exchange, a really safe environment, a welcoming and loving environment for open exchange. So once we have a bit of a chat, an interactive chat, I'll be taking you on a journey of guided reflection so that we can reflect a bit more deeply on our achievements and lessons for 2022. I'll also be hosting a little Q&A if you have any questions or topics you want to talk about with me and the rest of the people in the chat. Plus, I'll also be doing free mini tarot readings for people in the chat who feel called to ask questions. So I want to make this fun and interactive for everyone, and also really want to establish this as a first community event for all of the initiates. I think it's really important, while initiation is a solitary journey, that we can walk together in support, lifting each other up as we go through this spiritual journey of awakening. So if you like my vibe, you will also like the vibe of the other people that resonate with me as listeners. And I want you all to connect. I have done this myself in other communities and it's really beautiful. So I'm so excited to launch this community with a listener party to wrap up 2022. As I said, if you'd like to attend, just check the show notes and click the sign me up link, and you'll be taken to a form where you can fill out your details and you'll get reminders about this party. It's going to be happening USA time on Tuesday, December 20, 10 p.m. EST, 7 p.m. PST. If you're in Australia, this is happening on Wednesday, December 21, 2 p.m. Sydney time, 1 p.m. Brisbane time, 11 a.m. Perth time. I'm super excited to see you all there. So yes, this has been a bit of a wrap-up episode, but I will be back next week. Right at this stage, I'm not planning to take a break over the New Year period, but we'll see how that goes. So until next week, I wish you peace, I wish you love, and I hold heartfelt gratitude for your presence.